So on June 2nd, we're going to have the full moon in Scorpio. Quite a transformative time, of course. You know, Scorpio is the sign where we face our insecurities, emotional fears, insecurities, and strengthen them, transform them into strengths. And it's a sign where we want to stabilize the emotions, because our feelings and emotions are usually unstable, unsettled. It's where we feel vulnerable. And Scorpio is like that sort of fear that our sort of connection to the life force itself is going to be taken from us. And this compels us to want to control external situations and perhaps people and other things, because we're afraid of losing that thing in our life. And so, Scorpio is a sign where we can then sort of exaggerate or distort those things that we imagine could, as I say, really undermine our, life experience and sort of life happiness. It's fixed water, which has to do, as I say, with stabilizing the emotions, but it's also where we can get kind of emotionally obsessed over something. And again, it's, that's the origin of the energy itself. But what winds up happening is that when we're able to stabilize our emotions, then we go deeply into our true self, and it's a very devotional sign once that happens. But we need to transform the fear into strength. We need to transform our kind of default program, which says something outside of me is going to make me feel stable. Something outside of me is where my happiness lies. My heart and my connection to the life force, my connection to love and everything that's meaningful exists outside. And when that happens, it's a terrifying proposition. And again, Scorpio is just much more aware of it. It's that way for all of us. But Scorpio is the sign that's really aware of it, so they're always probing situations to find the weakness, to find the vulnerability, and then try to strengthen it. And they have this kind of relationship with the things in their life that they're attached to has a lot of fear. This is why, like, people who have a lot of planets in Scorpio, they can be a little difficult at times, because even just kind of relaxing into love is hard, because they're like, okay, well, if I relax into love, then I'm going to be dependent on love to make me happy, and I know nothing can make me happy. So they're kind of this kind of battle going on. But again, ultimately, once we transform that energy, let's say a person who has a lot of planets in Scorpio, or just in general, even if you don't, it's a quality of life. Then once we transform that fear of something external, hijacking our soul's connection, then we can go deeply into the profound experience of love and devotion that's only found inside, that's found internally. So the courage of Mars informs Scorpio energy and gives them the courage to face those fears and really transform. So on the full moon, of course, we're kind of full of that. The moon is very bright. It's opposite Taurus, which is where the sun and moon came together. So the full moons are the halfway point in the cycle. So Taurus, we're all working on the kind of stable part of ourselves, because we're in the Taurus time right now. So the opposite of the stability and structure of Taurus is the instability of Scorpio. We don't feel truly solid and stable, which is Taurus, until we face our fears and insecurities, which is Scorpio. So there's always this dynamic, this this sort of tension, this harmonizing tension that exists on full moons, because we have the sun at one point and the moon at the other point. So again, the moon is debilitated in Scorpio because of this intensity, because the moon is the part of us that just wants to feel solid and connected. So the moon is actually exalted in Taurus. So you have to be careful with, letting your emotions get the best of you and getting sort of emotionally carried away with things as we move up to the full moon in Scorpio on June 2nd. Now, between now and then, I'm recording this on Thursday night, Friday morning, like May 30th. The moon is going to be in Libra, where it's hemmed between Rahu and Saturn. We just had the moon in Virgo, joined Rahu. So it's going through that difficult phase that it's been in for the last several months, where it's joined Rahu, then it's hemmed between Rahu and Saturn, then it's joined Saturn. So on this full moon, it's not only that the moon is debilitated in Scorpio, but it's joined Saturn. Saturn has been in Scorpio since November of last year, and it turned retrograde this year in early March, mid-March. It was like March 13th. Saturn turned retrograde, and so this full moon has just passed over Saturn in Scorpio, which is trying to stabilize our emotional fears, and then we have this full moon. So again, there could be quite a bit of that sort of energy, and the creative option is to go into deeper silence and stillness, because that's what Saturn is about, and that's what's needed for Scorpio energy to evolve. We need to go inward. It's an emotional sign. It's a sign of stabilizing the emotions. The source of all emotion is pure love. And in fact, that pure love exists within our heart. It's where all emotion comes from. And because we're not connected to the pure love in our heart, we're fixated on something external, usually someone external, that we think is our gateway to love. We think that, because we fall in love with someone, we feel that they're somehow the connection to the love we have in our heart. And we lose ourselves in the projection. But the projection is a total fantasy, because then even if we do truly love that person, which we probably don't, if we're projecting a bunch of fantasies onto them, it's not love. It's some escape from some part of ourself. But what we wind up doing is we then wind up pressuring those people anyway. This is why sometimes with Scorpio energy, Scorpio people or people with a lot of planets there can bring a lot of emotional pressure on those that they, quote, love. That's what they would call that intensity, because they're putting too much pressure on this person to be like the gateway to the love in their heart. No one can be that. We have to find that within ourselves. So now is a great time to do that. With all this energy, this powerful Scorpio energy, it might be difficult to stay still and stay silent and stay solid inside, but that is the possibility, that is the potential. And that's always the potential when things get intense. A few other things that just happened this past week. For Mercury Retrograde went over Mercury in the sky. One more time. Went over Mars in the sky. Mercury Retrograde, right? Mercury went retrograde over Mars in the sky. And again, a lot of people were saying how that could lead to a lot of blow-ups and a lot of this kind of thing. I kind of said that I didn't think that was the case. I don't think that was the first option. It actually it could have really led to a lot of unwinding, at least internally, of things that were frustrating you, especially earlier when Mercury and Mars were passing in the sky in Aries, for instance. So there's always the possibility when Mercury's retrograde and it goes over Mars that we could have blow-ups. But again, the greater possibility, and there is a lot of high possibility when Mercury goes retrograde, that we're listening more, that we're hesitating with our speech. We're careful to not make a mistake. So if we're paying attention to that voice and we're careful and we're listening more, then Mercury going over Mars retrograde can also be a great catalyst for actually processing some things with people. I experienced that myself, actually. So, because I got genuinely really curious about some things that hadn't worked out before, and actually got to work some of those things out with people, and didn't react and didn't feel reactive even when people were criticizing me. So again, these are the gifts, and sometimes they're challenges as well, because you have to sit there and face the challenge. Like, for instance, in the example I just used with Mercury retrograde over Mars, I walked into a challenging situation. I knew it would be challenging conversation, and if I wasn't bringing the awareness, I could have reacted. But I brought the awareness to it. And when you bring the awareness to something that's powerful like that, then you ride that power to the source, to the truth, and there's a higher possibility. The same is true here. You have a debilitated moon. You have a debilitated full moon join Saturn, retrograde Saturn in Scorpio. A lot of potential to say, man, that's bad, 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 bad. It is difficult. Scorpio has a lot of emotional energy. We're going to feel it. It's a full moon. Even just the moon in Scorpio is difficult, let alone a full moon, let alone with Saturn, right? Moon Saturn is difficult. Saturn in Scorpio is difficult. Moon in Scorpio is difficult. They're all together, and it's a full moon. However, it's also like a wave. It's like a big wave. You know, I've been using the example lately when I talk about these karmic possibilities. It's like a surfer, you know, when you go surfing, you want to find the big wave. If you ride little waves, it's kind of fun. You just kind of ride the little wave. You see that big wave coming, maybe it scares you. It's like, man, I don't know if I can ride that wave. That's such a big wave. But then if we have the courage to ride that wave, it's going to take us a lot further, right? When you're on the big wave, you're going to go a lot further, a lot faster, a lot quicker. And that's really the way our karma works. It's the way it works in our natal chart and the way it works at certain moments in the sky. We've just had a lot of heavy stuff happen the last couple weeks. First of all, Saturn was opposite Mars. Then Saturn was opposite the Sun. Then Mercury went retrograde over Mars. Now Mercury's getting close to an exact opposition with Saturn as well. We're having this full moon. We just had the moon go over Rahu and then be hemmed by Libra is coming up. So again, there's a lot of heavy stuff going on. So these are big waves. And if you can ride that wave with skill, you're going to learn a lot. Look, you're studying astrology, you're studying yoga, you're studying these spiritual practices, these Vedic teachings, at least if you're listening to me. I'm not talking to people like they're children, you know, like we're ignorant babies who are like, oh, it's going to be bad. This is why when I talk about these things, I talk to the part of you that's a soul, that's a spirit, that is here to learn. And yeah, there are going to be difficulties. There's going to be difficulties. And honestly, this is why I kind of really rebel and reject the kind of nonsense astrology that just talks about how all of it's bad stuff. And I definitely talk about the challenges, but every challenge has a divine source. You know, like if people just talk about Mercury retrograde and the typical, computers messing up, it's just doing a disservice to the real reason we're here and how astrology can really help us all. So this is an intense full moon. There's no question about it. And with that intense wave, there's a lot of intense, deep possibility, and that's really there. And in fact, those things exist sort of concurrent with each other. The deeper the potential difficulty, the more is the necessity to bring consciousness to it, and then when you do, great things happen. They all exist at the same time, like the recent retrograde over Mars. You can just look at it on the surface and it's just going to it would have just jacked you around. Or you can really go into it with consciousness and it's going to evoke something different, but then it's also going to take you to a deeper place. So in addition to that full moon joined Saturn, debilitated full moon joined Saturn, Mercury retrograde is opposite. Mars is also opposite. So this That's why I'm talking about those configurations, because they're still there in Taurus and they're opposite this full moon. So we could really, again, be feeling quite a bit of the recent sort of polarizing around the Mars-Mercury themes. And those things could be really up for us on Sunday and Monday. Or actually, yeah, like, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, as we get closer to the full moon. So in addition, Venus has now gone into, Venus will have gone into Cancer by that time as well. Venus goes into Cancer on Friday, the 30th, I guess is the date. And this, or no, what is the date on the Friday? Is it the 30th? I don't remember any dates anymore. 29th. I'm just trying to stay up with the year. So Venus Jupiter in Cancer. Now again, this could bring a lot of devotion. For sure, it can really elevate this sort of romantic energy into something that's much more devotional. It can also lead to maybe more longing for a romantic kind of interaction if you're a little bit sort of lovelorn or heartbroken. Can feel a little bit more like that at times in Cancer. However, if you're a spiritual person, and I mean spiritual in the sense of, for instance, like, a devotion to a guru or to a spiritual master, and it's a devotional thing for you, not just something that you say. And I say that with all due respect. There are people who they say, "Oh yeah, I believe in this," but it's not in their heart. They don't cry for the love of their guru, for the love of their teacher. If you have that kind of what's called bhakti, that kind of devotion, then this could be a great month as Venus, 3.5 weeks to a month as Venus goes through Cancer and is joined Jupiter. So we'll feel that bhakti, that devotion, over the weekend. It's really a good time to bring your romantic projections and your desire for partnership and all of that sweetness and beauty that you're looking for into something high and pure, which is what Cancer is. It's a sattvic sign, and it'll be joined Jupiter, a sattvic planet. But again, if you're really tangled up in your desires, you're going to feel how your desires fall short of your standards. This is what happens when the Rajasic planets, that's Venus and Mercury, go into sattvic signs. There's a kind of otherworldly quality to it, and Venus and Mercury are very worldly, where we want to communicate with people and we want people to appreciate us and we want to be appreciated. These standards that are really high can lead to disappointments. So this will be going for the next several weeks as Venus goes through Cancer. But for this full moon in Scorpio, it could lead to a higher devotional promise as well, because we'll have this full moon in Scorpio where all that emotional power is, challenging us to go deeply into our pure heart, not the heart of our attachments, and go deeper into what's called bhakti. And Venus in Cancer is giving the same promise. Now, the last thing to say about this full moon is it's in the nakshatra of Jyeshta. Jyeshta is ruled by Lord Indra, who was the king of the gods. And there's a great story about Indra who, that shows his nature. Lord Indra, in the ancient texts, in particular in the Rig Veda, there are stories of where the great dragon came and drank all the water and stole all the water from the earth. And so Lord Indra, in order to defeat the dragon who stole the water, allowed himself to be swallowed. So he was swallowed by the dragon and then cut himself out of the belly. He cut open the belly of the dragon and all of the water came back to earth. So it's kind of this nature of Scorpio to allow ourselves to be kind of swallowed up by the sort of dragon of our desires and our ambitions to control and to possess and to rule, which is a big Scorpio motivation as being ruled by Mars. But the true courage is to allow ourselves to be swallowed up and then return the water, return the love to everyone and share it. Scorpio is very loyal. They're great friends. They're great when they're holding that emotional space for others. Scorpio, I'm saying people that have Scorpio planets or Scorpio ascendant, they get into trouble when they're motivated toward their own desires, because then they start, as I said earlier, attaching their emotional peace to things that are external, and they really feel the pain of that. They really feel the stress of that. And then they get into trying to control situations, and it gets really off. But when they're holding space for others, you really see the greatness of Scorpio come through. So this is another big promise for this full moon, is to hold space for others in the spirit of service, and stay more detached from your own emotional dramas and situations. So I hope this was helpful, and you stay calm and peaceful as the moon winds up being hemmed in Libra and then goes into Scorpio and then is full on June 2nd. So take care.